Is the video going to come up?
I don't know. Just go ahead. We're live.
We're live, huh? Well, hey, everybody. Thank you for your patience and thank you for being here. I'm Peter Lawson Jones, and I'm here with my co-host, the esteemed Dave Udelf. Matter of fact,
Esteemed?
Dave and I have known each other for longer than we care to acknowledge. We all go all the way back to high school, which is like, I think we graduated in 2016 from high school, something like that. That's
I don't think so. And that goes back to middle school, by the way.
Wow. Ooh. Okay, 2013 then.
Yeah.
But we're glad everybody could join us for this the maiden voyage, the premiere, the debut of Spark, and we've got inspirational conversations coming your way that are going to ignite your success. Just a little bit about myself very quickly, because I don't want to waste your time hearing about me, because we have some extraordinary guests this evening. But I'm an actor, a lawyer. I was served in elective office for about 22 years, and also a playwright. But the most important thing, and I'm going to get this out, is that I'm happily married to Lisa Payne Jones, and I have 3 great kids, and Ryan, Leah, and Evan. And if the 3 of you aren't watching this, I'm disinheriting you, just so you know it. So let me, without further ado, let me kick it to Dave, who will tell you a little bit about himself and then introduce our extraordinary guest.
Peter, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's been a lot of work putting this thing together. And here we go. And I hope you enjoy the show. I'm Dr. David Udelf. I'm a clinical and sports psychologist. I'm also a coach. So I've got some things in common. I've been coaching since 1969. Please don't do the age math on that, okay? You don't want to do that.
He was precocious. He started as an infant.
And I was a writer, which I'll talk about in a little bit, how I got connected with Sherman Smith, who you see in the bottom left of your screen. So I was a journalist, still am, still do some writing for Psychology Today magazine, and still coaching and still working as a psychologist, and I don't plan on quitting. So there you go. Now I'd like to spend a little bit of time in welcoming our 2 guests. Sherman Smith, who is on your left, unbelievable coach, a 23-year career in the professional ranks with the Houston Oilers, Tennessee Titans, Washington Redskins, Seattle Seahawks. He was a 1976 graduate of Miami University, my alma mater, by the way. I graduated a year ahead of him. And also had a great 8-year career as a running back. And can I share your nickname, Sherman Tank? Remember that?
Yeah.
Okay, well, there you go. And Sherman's coached started in high school in 1984, coached at his alma mater at Miami for a couple of years in 90, 91, was at the University of Illinois for 3 years, I believe, then on to his NFL career. So that's a little bit about Sherman Smith. By the way, 3 appearances at a Super Bowl. The guy, I think he knows what he's doing in coaching, okay? As does this other gentleman on the right, Deland McCullough, a 1996 graduate of Miami University, undrafted free agent with the Cincinnati Bengals, and had a bit of an injury mishap, which maybe he'll share. Coached in high school for 2 or 3 years in the Cincinnati area, I want to say. Mm-hmm. Harmony Community School. Coached at Miami University for a year and had stops at Indiana, University of Southern California, and of course his 3-year stint with the Kansas City Chiefs, including 2 visits to the Super Bowl. Last year, coached at the University of Indiana, and very recently took on the running backs coach position at the University of Notre Dame with the Fighting Irish. So there you have it, a little bit about our guests. Sherman, would you like to maybe say a little bit more about yourself and what makes Sherman Smith, Sherman Smith?
Oh, well, thanks, David. Man, it's a pleasure to be on the podcast with you guys tonight. I just know, it's just been an exciting career for me, growing up in Youngstown, Ohio, having an opportunity to be a part of a high school program that started out very bad, but we had a coach that came in and kind of turned the program around and made a difference in the lives of all the players in our community. And I think that's where I had got the inspiration to want to be a coach. And so it started there with my high school coach, Clifton Knox, and it just propelled from there. And really, when I went to college, I just wanted to be a high school coach, coaching in the college ranks. And the NFL was never anything that I really had a desire to do, but I recognized that God had bigger plans for me. So, the opportunity to coach on the high school level for 5 years, college level for 5 years, and in the NFL for 22 years definitely was an exciting career for me. And so, and be able to coach a man like my son over there, be a part of guys like that. So it's just been exciting. And, I think, Peter, since you talk about your wife, yeah, man, I've been, I got my bride Sharon. Today's my wife's birthday, and she's
happy
she
birthday
turned 45
to you.
today, yeah. so married 4 years, and my bride, and like 3 beautiful kids and seven grandkids. So man, I'm a blessed man.
Hey, I have to ask you a really quick question. You're from Youngstown. One of my best friends, Elvin Charity. Did you know Elvin?
Yeah.
Ever play against him? What's that?
We played with each other. We went to the same high school.
I'll be darned. That's one of my closest friends.
Yeah. Alvin was in the same class as my old Vincent. And then his other was in my class, his younger brother. So,
okay.
So the Charities, man, yeah, I know the whole family. Yes, sir.
Oh, I can't wait to talk to Elvin and share this with him.
Yeah, please tell him I said hello.
Yeah, Elvin and I went to law school together, and he was one of the groomsmen in my wedding. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Elvin was one of the guys that was a product of our high school. He was a great football player, but we knew that he had the intelligence to go to an Ivy League school, and he represented and made us all proud of the type of man that he is. And, so we were all rooting for him, and I'm glad to see that, man, he's done well. It's not a surprise.
That's great. Great connection there. It's a small world, gentlemen. Small world.
1 degree of separation, not 6. 1.
There you go. Deland, what would you like to say about yourself and introducing yourself to the audience?
Just first off, thanks for having me and working, around everybody's schedule. I'm in my schedule in particular, but I mean, just happy, thankful and blessed to be on the show, opportunity to share, my story and just some of the things that helped me along the way. I mean, obviously from Youngstown and, grew up in a loving family, played football kind of just as an escape, to be completely honest. I don't think the true talent that I had really showed up until later on in my high school career, because I pretty much felt like the underdog all the time. I was small, I was skinny, but I just kind of said, look, I'm gonna just work hard as I can and let the chips fall where they may. Was all set to going into my senior year just to go to the Navy. I was back then it wasn't email, so I was handwriting letters to like Butler and University of Indianapolis. Wasn't starting, and then my senior year I had an opportunity to start, and I think just the hard work paid off and kind of untapped some of my ability to play the game. As you already stated, was blessed enough to play and go to college and really make a mark there. A lot of that was sparked by the gentleman who's sitting there with us right now, of course. And then just getting into coaching, my track was I never even thought about coaching. You know, I hadn't really no thought of really coaching, you know, beyond with coaching at all. And then the school I was at, the high school I was at, those guys just assumed it was in Cincinnati. I went to Miami of Ohio. I played at the Bengals. So the assumption was, oh, this guy's going to coach. So I said, all right, I guess I'm a coach, you know, and everything kind of took off from there. So just, you know, happy to share the story and get into more details with it. Just like everybody on here stated, I'm 21 years, and in August I'll be 22 years married, you know, and I got 4 sons. So just extremely excited about that and doing my best to be the proper model and mentor and teacher and everything I can be to my 4 young guys.
That's great. And your sons are all back at Indiana, aren't they?
Well, 2 of them are. 2 of them are students there. One of them is 5, so he ain't doing nothing.
Oh,
but in the
I thought you
background,
had. Yeah, I guess he's a little young for
yeah.
that.
But then I got another guy who is all to be determined on what he's going to do. So he's still in his recruiting process, and we'll figure out what's going to happen there.
Football player as well?
Oh yeah,
He's
without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Is he going to be as good as either the 2 of you?
We'll see. I mean, he's one of the high ranked. I don't know. He might be the 100. He's in the top 200, top 150 players in the country. So yeah.
Wow. That's. Wasn't he at Indiana, University of Indiana at one point?
Yeah, he's there now. So my oldest son is there.
Okay.
Who transferred from Miami of Ohio, and then my other son, Deland, he was a 6th ranked player in the country. He was committed to Ohio State, and then he switched to Indiana. So he's a pretty special player too.
How tough? That must have been a tough decision to make. Notre Dame came up rather suddenly, and congratulations on that, by the way, on your new position.
Thank you.
How did all that happen?
Well, I mean, that's just the nature of this business. You know, when I came from the NFL, that was a voluntary decision. I mean, I came from the NFL. When I went to the NFL, I didn't go there to stay. You know, it was more to go in and just learn, earn respect, and basically to come back and be a better college coach, and to put myself ultimately in a position to be a head coach. So once went there, started having some success, went to a Super Bowl, won a Super Bowl. I thought it was a perfect opportunity to jump back into college football. So that's what led me. There was a lot of opportunities, but led me back to Indiana. And then after this last season ended, there were other suitors that came after me, and I kind of stiff-armed a couple of them, a couple other NFL opportunities. But then the stakes kind of got pretty high, and Marcus Freeman called and I just said, look, I need to hear what he has to say. And then, interviewed there, and things went really well. And then, I mean, ironically, right after that, I got a call from the Giants, and they kind of gave one of those offer you can't refuse, you know. But I refused it because I wanted to continue my track in college and see where that takes me, which the goal is ultimately become a head coach in college.
And
I like the analogy you said. You stiff-armed some of the offers. Quick question for you. So how is it adjusting to a new culture, college versus the pros, where you've been several years, whole new set of players, and there's some interesting things happening in Notre Dame where they have their first African-American head coach in the storied history, because Notre Dame is probably the iconic football program in the nation.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that drew me to the circumstance. You know, just being a part of something here on the onset that can be historic in nature. And shoot, I wanted to be involved with that, you know. But the adjustment for me has been relatively seamless, whether it was going to the NFL as far as the interpersonal aspects of it, and going to college, coming back to college. Just like my dad, the ability to form relationships and get guys on the same page. It don't matter if those guys are millionaires or aspiring millionaires, you know. But at the end of the day, they want to know you care about them, know that you got their best interest in mind. The football stuff will come, The expertise is there, and the guys see that already, and we're already making some great strides there. But just wanting to be an impact to those guys and provide some different things in their lives to make them better people, because we know football has it's a finite circumstance, and the guys don't want to hear that. But I was like, look, I'm 3 surgeries in, man. This thing don't last very long.
What do you tell them about? You had a tough, you were just on the cusp of making the Cincinnati Bengals as a player, and you had that injury. Could you talk about that a little bit, and what you what you share with your players about that?
Well, I mean, the interesting part is no matter what level that I was on, I will always start from the bottom. So here I am, I go to, in high school, I rose up. I mean, I didn't start till I was a senior. Then I go to Miami, I'm back on the bottom, in quick time, I ascend to being one of the better players that come out of Miami as a running back. I go to the NFL, had great workouts. I go to the NFL, thought I was going to get drafted. Go to the NFL, and I'm last on the depth chart. By the end of that training camp, was at the top of the depth chart, to be completely honest, and was set to kind of be the guy. And with 2 minutes left in the last preseason game against the Detroit Lions, we were running the screen to the left, and the guy just fell through my knee. So there you go. You start over again. So just explaining when I'm talking to the guys that I deal with, just how you need to embrace the opportunity, embrace every day in this sport, because you don't know when it's going to be taken from you. But along the way, you want to continue to build great relationships and show that you can function at a high level, and that when you were in there, you gave everything you had.
That's
Deland, to that point, one of the hardest things for any of us to do is to pivot from one career aspiration to another. Was that a low point for you? How challenging? I mean, 2 minutes left in the preseason. You're there. This happens. How did you bounce back from that? Because one of the most important things any human being can have is resiliency. You clearly showed it. But how was that transition? How was that pivot away from being a pro football player to having to figure out what you're going to do next?
Well, I mean, for me, everything that would happen on a professional level was all bonus anyway, because, how I was brought up and just the opportunities that were in front of me, I never had them climaxing with going to the NFL. That never was what my thought was. So anything that was happening, I was like, hey, okay.
I think we lost him.
Yeah, we got you back.
You got me. Okay. Yeah. So the pivot wasn't hard, because I felt like it was always, to me, about earning respect. And I think, just like I tell my guys, I didn't look back and say, man, I wish I had this to do over. I wish I would have practiced harder this day, or I wish I would have played harder in this game. I said, look, it was all bonus, and man, the good Lord put me in a position to even be an inspiration to guys back at that time, just the way I prepared and the way I played. And ultimately, I'd even open up doors for me as we go forward now, because people remember how I, conducted myself as a player and just how driven I was. And now that's been some of the building blocks to help me in my coaching career.
Sherman, did you have any moments like that were very dramatic, that were transition points? And how did you handle that in your playing coaching career?
Well, like Deland, my career came to an end because of a knee injury. In my 8th year in the league, so I had a non-contact injury where I blew my knee out. And, and they told me it was a career-ending injury. But the only difference for me is I really never had aspirations of playing in the NFL. And I was somewhat excited to get started on my coaching career. So when that happened, I wasn't failing around to figure out what I was going to do. I said, okay, now I get to do what I really wanted to do when I went to college. And so I was excited about getting started on my teaching and career. And, I just wanted to be a high school coach and a high teacher. So that was it. So I was really kind of excited about it, and had a fulfilling pro career, because every down I played, from the standpoint I had dreams of playing in the NFL. But I think just like what Deland said, through hard work and preparation, and just the good Lord, I had a chance to play in the league, and some success, play with some great guys, and it helped me prepare to be a coach later on.
Boy, I tell you, you two might be the ultimate when it comes to glass half full kind of guys. I mean, your optimism, your sense, you're finding that silver lining when, let's face it, a lot of people never bounce back psychologically from what you experienced in particular, Deland, and also what you experienced in your 8th year, Sherman. And so I just find this remarkable. I wish we could bottle that ingredient that you have and share it, because one of the things you can rest assured that if you're living life, you are going to encounter obstacles. And but most people, so let me ask you, what is it? Is it faith? What is it that you have that allowed you both to view those endings as welcome beginnings to what you're going to do next in life? What is it? What is that element?
Well, for me, it starts with faith, and just, definitely starts with faith, and then just life experience. Probably as chronicled in some of the things, the ESPN stuff and all that. I mean, it was a rough road for me, just with some things personally and my family and stuff like that, where you had to be resilient, or you would be an excuse maker of saying, well, if this didn't happen or if that didn't happen, and woulda, could watch, I could have did this or I could have did that. I never really operated that way. I just was like, look, I'm gonna just keep on moving forward, and keep on just continuing. And to me, it was always just about earning respect, because I always felt like I was always in a subservient position. So just wanted to continue to uplift myself. I really wanted to prove that I could be successful outside of, the Youngstown area, have a family, do right by them, do my best to be a good Christian man, and whatever God, takes me to do it at the best of my ability. So up to this point, man, still a work in progress, but I'm going to keep on hammering away at it.
Well, you know what? And I want to make a comment on Peter's comments and Deland's comments about how the glass half empty. And that's what elite, as a sports psychologist, the research is very clear. Elite people, when the going gets tough, they get going. Okay. They ignite. Other people suppress. They get too caught up in the bad part. They get too caught up in the emotion. Okay. But elite people, they ignite. They get going. And you've just demonstrated that and described it beautifully. Okay. Sherman, would you like to add to what Deland said?
Yeah, well, Deland definitely, talked about his path, and I think ours are very similar, even though, I came before him. I think growing up in Youngstown really helped me growing up during the time when I grew up, during the civil rights movement, and just, it was tough growing up in Youngstown, but we had a strong community. And so we learned, you had to be resilient, you had to be tough. Growing up, going to a predominantly Black high school, we knew when we played basketball games, if we played a white school, to beat 7 people, we had referees. So we went out there with that killing that with a sledgehammer attitude. In football, we knew we had to beat 15 guys. We had to beat the referees. So we had that kind of attitude going forward that, you just had to be tough. And I thank God that, my dad did a great example of being a model and resiliency and doing things hard. At the age of 15, my father was fighting in the Korean War, so he could bring money home to help his family. 15 years old, fighting in a war. So, I learned, you had to be tough. But I think also just the foundation for me also became my faith. I became a Christian later on. at my rookie year in the league, and my faith became a foundation that really gave me a lot of stability during those hard times, and trusting that God had a plan for my life. And it didn't mean it was easy. So I just understood that life is tough. They say you call life you're in a storm, coming out of storm, or getting ready to go into a storm in life. You always transition into something. So I'm just prepared. Thank God for giving me the resiliency to do that, but the preparation I got from my home upbringing in Youngstown, and with my father and my mom, and people in my life, it helped make a difference.
Hey, Sherman, before we go to asking they used to call it the $64,000 question. Before we go there, I read, I think Dave shared an article about you with me, and it was fascinating because it was your first or second year, and there was a guy who was a starter and his knee was blown out. He knew immediately his career was over, and yet he had nothing but joy thinking about what God had planned for him next. And you said that ignited you spiritually, his attitude at what a time when most people would have been suicidally depressed. So talk a little bit about that. I just thought that was an incredible story.
I really think that happened at a point in my life, Peter, where I really was searching, and I really wanted to know who this Jesus Christ was, who this God was that people were telling me about. And I'm a visual learner, and the people that were telling me Jesus Christ could do in my life, they weren't living any differently than I was, And so I said, it didn't look like Jesus would make much of a difference in your life. So how you tell me he's gonna make a difference in mine? And so I asked God, I said, I need somebody to show me. And it dragged by the heart, and this guy, Ken Hutchinson, was that guy. He was that guy. And, to make a long story short, our last preseason game, he blows his knee, gets blown out. They take him off the field. The word comes back, his career's over with. They said it looked like his knee exploded when they took an x-ray of it. So I go in the locker room, and I want to be a comfort to this guy and be a friend to him the way he had been to me. And I went in that locker room, and he comforted me. He was sitting there with ice packs on his knee, with a smile on his face, telling me how excited he was to see what God had planned for us. He said, Sherman, I'm a Christian, and nothing happens in my life that's not filtered through God's hands first. And right there in that locker room, you can't fake that peace and that joy that he had, you can't fake. At that time, man, you can't fake that. And right there, I asked him to tell me more about Jesus, and he shared the gospel with me right there in that locker room. And, and he became that guy that was a mentor, that showed me, that lived the life in front of me, and schooled me and scolded me and loved me and all that other stuff. But he was a difference maker in my life. That guy, I'll say, when I look at my life, God knows the impact Hutchinson had life.
Boy, if that's not on the road to Damascus moment, that, my goodness. Hey, Dave, why don't you ask what I call the $64,000 question? Because most of the listeners don't know there's one out of a zillion story involving the two of you. Would you mind talking? Dave, take it from here.
Well, guys, I wrote a story about this, and you guys have mentioned dad and son, but there's a story behind there, and probably began when why don't you guys take it away? And people listen very carefully, because this is some kind of a story that they actually made a movie out of. Okay. So would you guys be willing to share that? And who would like to start if you are?
Yeah.
I'll let Deland Marty go ahead and start.
Yeah. So, I'm adopted. And so, actually, I didn't even know I was adopted till I was, 5, 6 years old, something like that. And I found out I was playing with little Hot Wheel cars, and I was with my mom over one of her friend's house on the north side of Youngstown, and she was just talking to her friend, and she just said it right there in front of her. She said, "Yeah, when we adopted Deland," and I said, "Well, I didn't even know I was adopted." So that kind of took me back at a young age. Like, okay, I'm adopted. It was what it was. You know, I dealt with the mental part of the fact that I was adopted. However, you know, I never felt outside of anything. I mean, my family embraced me and did the things they needed from me. So as the years went on, my mom always said, hey, if you're ever interested in finding out who your adopted family is, and I really was like, it's fine. I mean, it is what it is. Not just part of my resiliency. I'm like, hey, you know, things happen. It was what it was. As I continued to get older, especially when I started having kids, I started wondering about things. I got this deep voice and this and that, and just different things you start wondering about family history, etc. And this was when I was this was literally right before I went to Indiana. I mean, I was on the way to Indiana, and my mom called and she said, she alluded to the attorney that did the adoption. So this what kind of got the juices really flowing. She said, I said, so what? I asked my mom, so what are you trying to say to me? She said, well, I wonder what's in his files. I said, you tell me. What would be in these files? And she said, well, you know, you were adopted from an orphanage. I never knew that. I was almost 35. I might have been 38, 39 years old. I said, I didn't know that. And she said, you know, the nuns there called you Baby John. So I said, why did they call me that? And she said, well, I don't know. She said, man, you were at a Catholic orphanage in Pittsburgh. You know, maybe they just gave your name out the Bible. So that kind of was a running joke in our house when I was just, not a joke, but it was like my sons would laugh about it and I would laugh about it. Just that name and how it was referred to as that, you know, not knowing really what the origins of it was. So a few years later, I'm at Indiana and I'm, you know, maybe a couple years later, I'm looking, I'll get on the internet. I'm trying to look up, you know, I don't even know how you find out any of this information. All the records were sealed. I searched through Pennsylvania, the records were sealed. There was a House bill that was in process. I think it was House Bill 162. That basically in Pennsylvania, the birth records they were in the process of being unsealed. I guess this was a bill where they was trying to get them unsealed. So maybe a year or two later, I take the job at the University of Southern California. And while we're moving into our house, I just get online and type in House Bill 162 again, and it literally had just passed, like the day before. I get online and look. So I call Pennsylvania. I say, hey, you know, I see this House bill pass. You know, I want to get my adoption information. And the lady said, well, you got to understand how this thing works. Just because it passed, I don't mean everything pours out right now. You got to. She said, but she said, the forms are online now. You can send all the information in. And when everything is open, your paperwork will be here and we'll send you what's called your original birth record, which is almost like an original birth certificate. So I filled out everything and I sent it in. I was in March of 2017. So here we are in November. We're like the week before Thanksgiving. I remember I'm in the office. It was on a Monday. And it just hit me. I hadn't thought about this whole thing. I didn't even think. I said, I wonder what's going on with this adoption paperwork. So I called the lady who I've been talking to in Pennsylvania at whatever the department is there. She didn't answer, and I didn't think any more of it. I said, okay, I'm about to go into a meeting. I went on with the rest of my day. However, when I got home, the paperwork was there. You know, I told my wife, I said, here's this adoption paperwork. She said, oh, shoot. So her and my oldest son was sitting there. I opened it up. It was one sheet of paper, and it had on there, had my mom's name, and didn't have birth name. It actually had my name on there, John Kenneth Briggs. So I said, okay, that's what they called me, John. That was what my name was, you know. So it was emotional, you know, to say the least, you know. And as the night went on, you know, I'm Googling and messing around trying to track my mom because she was 16 years older than me. I was born in Pennsylvania, so I'm thinking she's in Pennsylvania. So none of the stories or the written articles or anything talk about this. I actually found a person named Carol Denise Briggs, who was from Philadelphia, and who matched everything as far as, you know, she was 16 years older than me. So I sent her a message on Facebook. A lot of people don't know I sent her a message on Facebook first. And she didn't respond. So I was sitting at work the next day. I sent it like early in the morning. She didn't respond. So I called my wife. I said, man, she hasn't responded yet. And my wife said, well, first of all, if it's her, she might be having a heart attack right now saying, what's going on? It's just 45 years later, this guy reached out to me, you know? So I got online and I just said, let me just do I never did. It's just an open search for the name. So I put in my mom's name just on Google. I just Googled it and said, let me just search it. I mean, just because somebody may have lived in Pennsylvania don't mean they live there now. Just so and it was only a couple clicks down. It showed her profile on something. I went through, I found, was able to determine because it just had her first name, her middle initial, last name. And I found out that her middle name was Denise. I was just Googling and messing around. And I sent her a message, and she responded, a couple hours later. And I was stunning. I was in a special teams meeting and I sent her a message on Facebook Messenger and it said, Carol Briggs read your message. So my heart started beating. I'm like, oh, shoot. So I had my phone with me and I responded back. All I did was put question marks because I actually, the question I sent her was, I said, I apologize for reaching out to you like this, but in 1972, were you in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and put a baby boy up for adoption? So when it showed that she read it, all I did is send back question marks like, hey, you gonna answer the question? And she said, yes. She sent back, yes. So I got up and walked out the room then because I was like, oh, shoot. And I'm kind of blown back and I said, what was the baby's name? And a couple of seconds later, she sent back, she said, not Deland. So of course I laughed a little bit and I text back. I said, what was his name? She said, John. And she had it spelt the same way that it was because it was spelled Jon. And I just kind of had an emotional breakdown, like not break, but I was like very emotional, like, oh my goodness, this is her. And she didn't know what was going on. She said, what's going on? At that time, we was about to have a running back meeting. And there's no way I can dip out of that. So I just told her I will call her later on. So I talked to some of my players about it. I almost barely focused through the rest of that meeting and through the rest of practice. But then that night I called her and I got on the phone. I said, well, obviously I'm John. And she was like, we had some words back and forth with that. She seemed pretty excited. And I just asked the whole story, how she ended up in Pittsburgh. And she told me that. So it was like a calm conversation. It was like we've known each other for a real long time. And then I asked her, I said, I got any brothers and sisters? Because she revealed to me she's from Youngstown. She lives in Youngstown. That was a big part. And I told her where I lived, and she said, oh, shoot, we was like 10 minutes away from each other. Like my whole up through high school. So I'm like, wow. So she was living in Youngstown the whole time. So that's when she told me how she ended up in Pittsburgh, to her mom. When she found out she was pregnant, her mom sent her to a girl's home to have the baby. So that's when I said, I got any brothers and sisters? She said, no, I never had any more kids and never got married or anything. And I said, well, shoot, who's my dad? And it was ironic where I was. The big part is like how funny God worked, where I was located when she told me, because I'm walking through this whole conversation about where are you? She's telling me she's in Youngstown. I'm walking through a populated part of the USC athletic complex, just people around. I'm walking, talking. But when I asked her who my dad, I said, well, who's my dad? I happen to be going into a hallway that comes up onto the main floor at the facility. So it was like just nobody. It was like just going through a staircase up. And at that moment, she said, well, your dad is a man named Sherman Smith. And shoot, it was over for me at that point. Because she said, what? She said, what? I said, oh, I know him. And she said, how? And I said, he recruited me to Miami. I said, he's been my mentor for, 20 plus years. So went upstairs and, a few hours later, I called Coach. At that point, I just called him Coach. So I texted him because there was a picture of me and my dad took when I was visiting Miami. So you're talking about 1991. This was actually in 1990 when I visited Miami. We took a picture. Me and him took a picture standing next to each other in the locker room. And that picture, I kept that picture forever. Because we had just moved to California, I couldn't find it. And I was wondering if he had it. Because I was supposed to have that picture in my room when I was in college. And everybody would say, because my dad, he had left after my freshman year. So I still had that picture on like a big poster board with some other stuff. And people used to look up and say, hey, is that your dad? That's your dad right there, right? I'm like, nah. And the guys who were there when my dad was there, they all used to say, the joke, oh man, young Sherm, this, that, that was like the ongoing joke that, that we, kind of look like each other and everything. So I know I'm missing a part along the way. I did go to Seattle. This was interesting. So I went to Seattle when my dad was the coach there. This was before I found out, obviously. So like 3 years before I found out. And I'm doing a minority internship with the Seahawks. And even the guys there, Pete Carroll and those guys were like, hey man, there must be something in the water in Youngstown. Because you two guys look alike, man. And they looking at us over there working with running backs, and they like just looking at our mannerisms and things like that. So it just was funny. I'm like, yeah, all right. My dad even made the comment, oh man, y'all trying to say all brothers look alike, But so that was just interesting how people were loosely connecting dots, and who would make me say, look at Coach Smith and say, hey man, are you my dad? Nobody. Who would think that? I wouldn't have that thought at all in my mind. So that's kind of where it led to. And then, I did text my dad that night. I was asking him if he had that picture. Now I'm texting from the West Coast, so it's probably 1 o'clock in the morning where he at. So needless to say, he didn't respond. But the next morning I did call him, and I told him, what was going on. So that was it. That might be a good segue to my dad right there.
Yeah.
Yes.
What in the heck?
Reaction.
What was your reaction when you heard that?
Yeah.
Besides dropping the phone.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like Deland said, when he had sent me a message before asking about that picture. And so I started trying to find the picture, and I was asking my wife about the picture. And then, like I said, Deland, texted me the next morning and said, I need to talk to you. So I'm thinking, he's probably an opportunity coming up. So let me get a hold of him, And so I call him up, and he's not talking about a job opportunity. He tells me, I'm adopted, and, I started the process of looking for my biological parents, okay, that's good, and my mom, my biological mom, it's great, ready for him, and then when he said her name, I wasn't as excited from that standpoint because I knew his mom in a manner in which, before I had time to even think it was going to happen, he said, and I asked her who my dad was, and she said, and it was, man, I'm glad I wasn't driving in a car and all that other stuff, because I probably would have hit somebody head on, drove in the ditch or something, because, man, that just was, by surprise. I had heard the comments that people would make about us looking alike, talking alike, walking alike, and there was no reason for me to think he was a son. No one ever told me, hey, you fathered a son, man, you got a son, and no one told me that, so I'm not expecting that. So, Deland tells me that, and like Deland say, man, in the movie I was babbling, man, life, I don't know what to say, and I know, Deland may not have understood at that point, and I said to him, hey, I need to call you back because I need to process, because my head was just all over the place. And so got off the phone, just sat there and thought about, what was going on. And really for me, the first emotion was not that of excitement. I know it was excitement for Carol and, probably for Deland, but for me, it was painful, not because of Deland, not because, oh man, this guy is my son. It's painful for me to realize Deland didn't have what I had growing up, and I was responsible for that. This was a great young man, and, talking about being responsible as growing up and all that other stuff. And, I evidently, I didn't handle my responsibility. I was irresponsible. So I just felt bad for the fact that, I put Deland in that situation, and even his biological mom had put them in that situation. At that time, I think I was 63, 64 years old. So you see things differently at that age than you're 16, 17 years old. And so, man, I just felt really bad about, what I had done. And not, like I said, it wasn't about feeling bad about Deland, no, man, this guy, I mean, you want to talk about having somebody for your son, you couldn't do any better. I said, man, life, I'm blessed. This guy is sharp. This is doing, had a relationship, man. So that even made it a little bit harder, that we had the relationship, but it made it much easier because Deland was so gracious, and he said, he said, I don't want anything. I'm not mad at anybody. He said, if you aren't my father, that's okay. We have a relationship. If you are my father, we can build a relationship. And he made it as easy on me as it could be, and gracious toward me. And so, and then it began from there, like, we had a DNA test done because I talked to Carol. I talked to his mom for 45 years. So, when Deland told me, I need to talk to Carol, and so, and I don't know what Carol was expecting, but, I finally talked to her and, I apologized to her, and said, I'm sorry for putting you in that position, and just, she said, I just want to know if you can, her son, I said, man, you couldn't ask for anybody better, So I told Carol, I said, I know you're sure. I want to be sure. And so I said that to Deland, and we did the DNA test, and we got the results back from the DNA test, and that just confirmed everything. The thing I will say, from the time that we talked until the DNA test came back, that's when I was feeling, just hurting. But I think before the DNA test came back, man, I knew this. I would have been devastated if it had come back that I wasn't his father. I would have been, man, that would have been messed up to me. So I was kind of excited, hoping, man, I hope this is true. The only reason that I would want it to be true is I could get rid of the guilt. So I don't have to feel bad, But when it got to that point, I said, man, I hope I'm his father. And so when that came through, man, I was fired up. And my wife was running around there, jumping up and down, screaming like she was at a football game, about that. So, and it's just taken off from there, So it's been a great adventure, and and like I said, Deland's been awesome. My daughter, I was concerned when I found out about my wife, my daughter, and my son. And my wife was beautiful. When I told her about it, she said, hey, our family just got bigger. I want to meet my grandson. When I told my daughter, she said, I always wanted to have an older brother, and so she embraced him. When I told my son, he was good too. Hey, I'm glad I got an older brother. So my daughter and my son, through they hooked up, and and man, we're family. We're family, and that's how it rolls.
Well, I tell you, you're absolutely blessed with an extraordinary wife, because there are many women who frankly would not have reacted that same way. And I've had conversations with friends who found out late in life that they had a son or a daughter, and the whole family's not been as accepting. Some of the siblings have rejected their new sibling. So, I mean, you obviously have a wonderful family to begin with. And so it's so wonderful to hear how they immediately embraced and had excitement about this new addition to their family. Did you take any solace whatever in the fact that you had over the years been Deland's mentor and a father figure, and had helped shape his career as a coach and as a young man? Were you able to take any comfort in that during those initial moments when you first found out that this was a possibility, that he was your son?
Yeah, I did. And, and I think I talked to Deland, really said to me, Deland said, hey, you've been in my life, you've had an impact on my life. So, that definitely helped me feel a lot better about it. one of the things that I was always saying to my players when I started coaching, and it's funny how this statement came about. I would tell the guys, you may not be looking for a father, but I'm gonna treat you like your son. And that was my coaching philosophy when I started coaching. I'm gonna treat every guy like he's my son. And little did I know that, that I was coaching my son, and I didn't have to apologize to him for mistreating him, calling him out his name, disrespecting him, and all that other stuff. And so, I was excited about that, and and just to see the fine young man that he had developed into, to see the type of husband he was with his wife Darnell, and the type of father he was to those 4 boys, just proud as all get out. To see how Deland, how God had brought him through this, and his character, that you couldn't raise him any better. So I give credit to his adoptive mom, Udelf, the great job that she did, but for Deland, and just how he persevered through this thing, and he wasn't going to allow not having a father in his home to making it be an excuse for him not to do it. It motivated him, it kept him going, and made him strong. And as I look at him, my son, who that I have with my wife, when I look at those two guys, they're so similar in character, value, the type of husbands and fathers they are, and it's like, man, this is a God thing. I was totally involved in one guy's life, and I wasn't involved in Deland's life, but to see that God had brought them to the same point where these guys were solid men, fathers, husbands that any father would be proud of. And so, man, as I look at Deland, I say, man, I'm just so proud of him, and the type of man that he is, and I'm blessed. He's been.
And you had so much to contribute to that, to what Deland has become. And when I interviewed the two of you, it was amazing the similarities and the values. And some of you both of you, sometimes you got a little surprised. I would say, hey, Deland, that's what your dad said, and you were surprised. Mm-hmm. There was so much overlap, and that had to rub off. I mean, Deland, how much of your dad do you think has rubbed off on you, just in terms of as a mentor, as a coach? How could you, what were some of the things that you absorbed?
Well, I mean, like I said a little while ago, I had a whole, I love Coach Smith. I love Coach Smith. I love my dad. I'll ultimately become my dad. But the thing that's interesting in this whole thing is I wasn't operating like, hey, you know what? Coach Smith this is what he did. I'm going to do the same thing. This is just where God brought me. I told you I wasn't even trying to be a coach. I wasn't interested in being a coach. My dad talked about, he may not articulate it completely on this. When he got done playing, he was interested in being a teacher. I wasn't, but I ended up in teaching. I didn't even go to school for teaching. That's just the path that it took me on. So some of this is like you talking about the whole nurture versus nature situation. I just ended up in that situation. It wasn't like this is what I'm trying to do, or it wasn't like, hey, let me do the exact same thing that Coach Smith did. I wasn't even thinking about that. But on the flip side, the characteristics, obviously, that I gleaned from my dad, just being around him, obviously, part of just my genetic makeup, apparently, comes out when I'm as I'm having impacts on guys' lives and recruiting and mentoring and just being there for guys. Because we've had a couple of guys who he coached. Well, a guy he coached in Seattle, who I coached in Kansas City, and he's the perfect one. He's like, hey man, he sat in them meetings when we was in Kansas City. He's like, man, you sound just like your pops, man. He said, man, you guys sound just alike. And just think about this. I only got coached by my dad for 1 year, so it's not like, hey, I got 5 years to soak up his coaching style and the way he do things. He coached me for 1 season, and then he went to, so those things rubbed off on me to a degree. Yes, I continued to talk to him. Yes, I went and seen him in Seattle where my coaching style was kind of already established. When I went to see him in Seattle, it was really a pivotal point for me because, yeah, I was having a level of success at Indiana, but I started questioning, like, man, am I doing a good job as a coach? I just was wondering on some of the other like the bigger picture things of coaching. And when I went up there and spent time with my dad, I walked away like reaffirmed, like really strong in what I was doing in the path, in the way that I was working with guys and the methods that I was using as far as, really caring about them as people, and just I wasn't going to waver on that. Although maybe the situation I might have been in one, might have asked me to do that, and I didn't do it or wouldn't do it. So, I guess in a roundabout way, yes, there was definitely things that rubbed off from my dad and my time with him. But again, you start talking about just some things that apparently seeds were already in me, and they just grew, and they just happened to grow, right along the same stock as my dad. Because a lot of people who are around us, they say, "Man, you guys, y'all operate the same in coaching, and just the way you do things and your mannerisms, and the way that you can connect with guys and get the most out of them, and not only make them great football players, but great men."
Amazing story. And I will post articles that people can read, and you'll see the overlap. And remember that, you had him as a coach. You had your dad as a coach for 1 year at Miami, and all that other stuff happened. What was the year that you discovered that Sherman was your dad? Because was that 2019? It was just a few years ago.
2017. Yep.
2017.
Recently, in the grand scheme of things, recently.
So all that stuff with the coaching and going up to Seattle and having him as that all happened before
Yes.
you knew any of this.
Yep.
Just to get people with the timeline. Unbelievable story. And there was a movie made about it.
And there's a documentary, Show Me the Father, that both Dave and I
Show Me
have
the Father.
seen, and I highly recommend it to everybody. I was sharing with Sherman before we all came on air that I watched it, and I must have broken down in tears 4 or 5 times. And I said, I know the people sitting around me wondering what's wrong with this guy, because there were just so many poignant, powerful, potent moments in that. And it's a film that every father needs to see and then mold his conduct, behavior, and philosophy based on the dads who were interviewed there, the two of you. Just a beautiful film. And your story is one out of a zillion. If somebody told you this, if somebody told the majority of the public this had happened, they'd say, no way, impossible. You made that up. It's a great story, but it never would happen. So that's why it's even such an incredible privilege for Dave and I, and for those who are listening, to be able to hear firsthand from the two of you about that extraordinary discovery that a coach and a mentor is actually a father. So beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you one thing that was interesting when you're talking about just the unbelievable aspect of it. When ESPN reached out, so I told them the story, and it was silent at the end, and then they just erupted with, "This is unbelievable." It was exciting. So they wanted to do it. The next day, I got a call from those guys, the same people who I spoke to, which was Sarah Spain and John Minton. And they said the execs at ESPN didn't believe it. No. I had to provide them. They said, we don't believe it. Yeah. They just didn't believe the story. So I had to provide them with some things that kind of backed the story up before they moved forward. They didn't believe it.
And there was an E60 segment done on this, and there was a written thing that you can, all our listeners tonight, our viewers, can go look up and Show Me the Father and all these different things. So we're going to
and I don't know if you can see the comments from one of our listeners, my favorite cousin, actually. Thank you, Ingrid, for tuning in. She says, excellent character. It makes all the difference. Testify. What a beautiful, true story. Love this. And so that's exactly how I felt when I first saw the documentary. And when Dave first told me about the two of your personal story and personal journey. So, yeah.
What's more amazing, even, I mean, well, I don't think anything can be more amazing than that story, but the incredible character that you guys have as coaches. Both of you made the comment about, talk about just as a reflection of the kind of character you show. What do you think about yelling and screaming at your players like so many youth coaches do now, so many high school coaches? Have at it with that.
I'll let you go on that.
Well, I always felt I'd want to coach guys the way I'd want to be coached, talk to people the way I want to be talked, and the way I want someone to talk to my child. That's why I would say to guys, you may not be looking for a father, but I'm going to treat you like you're my sons. So I knew that was going to draw the line on how I was going to treat them. I was going to treat them with respect. Say the power of respect is to never disrespect. So it was just that thing in me, man. Just want to treat people right, and you don't have to call, cuss, and all of that other stuff to get your point across. To me, that shows you have poor communication skills if that's the only way you think you can get something across to people. And I think it's insulting to that person, telling them that's the only way they think you can get communicated to. So I just think you treat people right, man. This is the way you're supposed to treat people, and like I said, I'm going to talk to you the way I'd want to be talked to and the way I'd want you to talk to my son. So that was the thing that really steered me along that path. And then I discovered you can do it that way and you can be productive. And I think it's like Deland said, letting guys know that you care about them. That's a big thing. I was hoping my guys would know that I care about you as a person. I'm concerned about that. The football player part, we'll take care of that. But, I'm concerned about you as a person and not just trying to manipulate you so you can go out on the field and play good and all that other stuff. But, I want you to walk away from this game a better person and when you walk in and having a positive experience, allowing me to be a coach. And I look at that way also. It's a privilege, man. It's a privilege to get to coach these men, these youngsters, and then to coach grown men that have kids. It's a privilege and not a right, and so, and it's a responsibility. And so I just felt that privilege and that responsibility I was going to try not to ever violate core principles that I think that should govern how you do it.
Two quick questions. That says so much about you. Two quick questions. Number one, you have found, I guess both of you have found, that philosophy is applicable whether you're coaching college students or professionals. Number one. Number two, do you think your philosophy is shared by the majority of coaches at the college, at the collegiate, and at the professional level?
I know one thing was interesting. I can't remember. It may not have been after the Super Bowl. It might have been after the AFC Championship game. I think my first year there. I know Coach Reed had made a comment to the staff. The first time I heard it, just kind of definitively, like the gauntlet was laid down saying, hey, this is a different age. This is a different time in coaching. These guys don't respond the way you would think that they would to firing, the old fire and brimstone type situation. So I'm sitting there with a big smile on my face because I don't operate that way anyway. So, but I guess just to answer your question, yes, it's making its rounds. Some guys still coach the way they feel that is most effective for them, and everybody got to have their own, have their own style. But at the end of the day, I was talking to a running back coach the other day. I don't even know him from anywhere. He reached out through the athletic department. And he said, he wanted to talk to me and get some mentoring with coaching. And long story short, he had asked me, talking about just some of the pillars of the way I coach and different things and how I operate. And I said these same things right here. I said, look, I don't get in all of that cursing at guys and different things or hollering at them. I said, look, on the field, I'm just being respectful to the guys because I don't need to go running down the field chasing after him. He gonna come back to me. He got to come back. That's something. We coming back, And when he get back, we have those conversations. So it's interesting. Marcus Freeman just sees the interaction with all the coaches, but even with that, I don't know, was a guy who made an error I don't know, it might have been today or it might have been on Tuesday. And it was a clear error. He's seen just the way I went up. Just gonna pull the guy over. That conversation happened behind the scenes. You know, it happened back in the back part of the line. And more importantly, it'll happen in the meeting room. But I'm not in there emasculating guys and doing all of that and posturing and showing, look at me, look how I dealt with this situation, when you could be just as effective with being respectful, with getting the maximum out of them by just appealing to them as a person and not as some type of a dictator.
It's interesting because just earlier today I was reading an article where it was talking about Steve Kerr, the coach of the Golden State Warriors, had spoken via Zoom to a group of law students at Harvard, and he described his philosophy as built upon 4 pillars. You used the same term, pillars, and his were compassion, joy, competition, compassion, and mindfulness. Those were his 4 pillars. But I just find it so interesting that you use that same term, the pillars of your coaching philosophy, what your coaching philosophy is built upon.
And you guys are dealing with older athletes. There's people out in our listening audience that might be doing youth coaching, and some people that'll be listening to this later on. Can't even imagine that hollering, swearing at younger athletes, never mind college and pro guys, but it's going on all over the place.
Dave, I was going to say this. I know for me, one of the most important questions that I got asked when I left Miami, Ohio to go to the University of Illinois, Lou Tepper was the coach. And the very first question that he asked me in the interview was, why do you coach? Do you coach to make a living, or do you coach to make a difference? And I think that's one of the most important questions coaches and people must ask themselves. Why do I do that? Because I truly believe why you do it, it impacts how you do it. And it was clear to me, I coach to make a difference. And that was going to impact how I coached. And I know the type of difference that I wanted to make. And so, but that's a question I always ask, why do you coach? And just like you're saying, you can go around and you can see a lot of coaches coaching today. And I can watch coach and I can give an idea of why I think they coach, and it's coaching to win. It's coaching to be right. It's coaching to be seen. It's coaching for the next job. Making a difference is not that big of an issue as long as we get W's. And so I just think that's a real important question. And I ask coaches, man, why do you coach? And if you coach to make a difference, then you're going to coach with some mindfulness in those pillars that you talked about. You're going to coach. You're going to coach different than most guys.
And making a difference should be the backbone of you're working with people. I don't care if you're a doctor, a psychologist, a coach, whatever you are. That should be the backbone of everything that you do if you're dealing with people.
This is why we're on this plane. This is the purpose of existence, is to make a positive difference, to leave the world a better place because we were here. And if that's not your philosophy, if you think it's about accumulating money and accolades and power and influence, you will have wasted whatever time that you've been granted here on earth.
And the ancient Greeks even had something to say about that a long time ago. And that's what this show is about too, I might add, Peter, about making a difference. That's exactly the purpose of this show.
And there is no question, anybody who's had the privilege, again, that word came up before, anybody who's had the privilege of listening to Deland and Sherman this evening and can apply some of the lessons, some of the philosophy, the approach that they have, will make a difference in their lives. And again, I applaud you for your attitude. I applaud you for your resiliency, for again, seeing the glass as half full. And so when there's a challenge, you're able to respond in a positive way and not let it keep you down and suppress you. So,
As you said, Sherman, in an interview, you said, what are you trying to do here? Trying to just let everybody know how mad you are? Or are you trying to improve this player, trying to improve this guy? And that's a great question everybody needs to ask themselves. And you guys are we're going to post some articles and some of the pictures we talked about. By the way, Deland, I can still see your dad as an 18-year-old freshman at Miami running around with his afro and his black and red Youngstown North letter jacket. I'll never forget it.
Hey, Sherman, you had an afro too once upon a time, huh?
Oh yeah, man. I see you. Yes, sir. And I had
really?
one time too. So man, I had all of it. I went through all of it.
Oh, I can remember. I got.
Wait, Dave, you had a Jerry curl too back in the day.
Well, I kind of did, actually. Fits me like a glove, doesn't it?
Oh boy! Hey, the truth is, we could talk to you for another several hours, and I hope that we have a chance to continue. I know that you've been friends and have interacted with Dave over the years, and I hope you add me to that family, notwithstanding the fact that I didn't go to Miami, that you could forgive that indiscretion on my part.
We won't hold
Peter, you weren't good enough to go to Miami.
I see that today. Hey, I'm not going to argue with that point with the three of you today. That's for sure. So, again, I hope that everybody has enjoyed this conversation, this dialogue over the last hour or so. We did want to give some special thanks. I don't know if those listening were able to see our introductory video, but I wanted to certainly thank those people who contributed to the making of that video. Mark Moore, our videographer, and Ed Flash Ferenc, who did the narration. Susie Frazier, who was our pretend guest. And Susie Frazier will be our actual guest. She's an extraordinary artist with a wonderful story. And Dave and I have both gotten to know her in different ways. And so that's an interesting story in and of itself, especially how Dave met her. But she will be our guest on May the 25th, I believe. It's a Wednesday, May the 25th. So I want to also thank Trenton Adair, who did our graphics. Wonderful. I think he's a senior at the Cleveland Institute of Art. And I want to thank my own son, my youngest, Evan Cook Jones. He did the music, or as the kids call it, the beats that were provided on the video. And then Christopher and Jessica Butler, who own Academy Tavern, where we filmed the video. And so if you're in Cleveland, Sherman and Deland, you have to go to the Academy Tavern for a good meal. So,
all right.
And we'll pay for it.
We'll pay for it.
Dave and I will.
There we go.
And I want to give
you just got to get here.
And I want to give you guys, Sherman and Deland, a special thanks. You're inspiring. I got to tell you, it's an inspiration. And that's why we invited you to be on this initial show. Our very first guest. So you're famous. Wait a minute. You are already famous. Couple of guys with a combined 5 trips to the Super Bowl.
And Super Bowl rings. Right?
And Super Bowl rings. Do you have your?
They didn't just go there for the parties. They actually brought back some hardware. So yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
You don't happen to be wearing your rings right now, do you?
No.
Okay. I thought you could show us.
You should have told me before. I would have had it.
Hey, Dave, do you remember the track? I ran track at Shaker, and our track coach, Mr. Rice, Bob Rice, was a referee in the NFL for many years. And so I ran into his son, and his son had on his dad's Super Bowl ring. So he let me put it on and take a picture. So I've worn one, but only momentarily. It was not mine for the long term. Another person we need to thank is our engineer, our marketing guru and consultant, Sarah J. McCord. So everybody, a hand for Sarah. She's made it happen. Thanks, Sarah.
And thank you, all of our listeners. We really appreciate your tuning in. We're going to be posting some articles that will tell you a little bit more about Deland and Sherman Smith. And we'll post some pictures and some other things. And hope you enjoyed the show. And hope you have a great evening. I'll see you in May 25th.
Happy Passover and happy and blessed Easter to everybody.
Thanks.
Same, man. All right, guys.
Good night.
Thanks a lot. Now.
Thank you.